Hello, friends, and welcome back. We are here to discuss our theories on of how A Song of Ice and Fire will end. I have a question for everyone, though, before we start. So, as we go through the introductions, give us a quick introduction, and then answer honestly. Do you really want this series to be finished? Like, do you really want to know, or would you rather it be open ended and have theories and conversations like this? Susanna, I think I know your answer.
Yeah, my name is Susanna Imaginario. I'm the author of Timelessness, and I run a YouTube channel called Den of the Weird. And yes, I have my theories, but I would very much want to know how it ends the way the author intended. I don't care. I need to know how it ends.
Carl?
Yeah, I'm Carl Albert, author of Truth of Crowns, which is actually a little bit like Game of Thrones if anyone's interested in reading it. That's my one plug for the day. Um,
It's one more
but
than usual.
I absolutely want the ending, not least because season 7 and 8 sucked so much of Game of Thrones. I want to know what George intended, and and in my opinion, it's certainly that the books in general are better anyway. And so I want to see the better version of the ending one way or another, even though, as we can get into, I think some of the things that went wrong in the show, quote unquote, went wrong, uh, I do think we'll have some parallels in the books. Not least something we were talking about right before we got on air. Anyway, Paramita, you're up.
Hello, everyone. My name is Paramita. I'm an avid reader and I like to read books in a variety of genres. I'm also a member of the Page Chewing Forum. I'm relatively new to A Song of Ice and Fire compared to the other panelists here, but I really enjoyed the reading and rereading the series. I have not seen the show, but I have actually seen lots of videos about the show, so I roughly know what happens. And to answer Steve's question, I would very much like the series to be finished by the author as the
Just
author
wondering.
intends.
I think the extra part of that. So, Steve, I get where you're coming from with the question because theorizing is fun, and there is something nice about you can't have a shitty ending if there is no ending, right? That said, I would take a shitty ending over no ending. Like I'm glad Game of Thrones ended, even though it ended terribly. Um, but there will still be room for theories. Like that's part of what is so compelling to me, and what I just love so much about A Song of Ice and Fire and the universe that George created is that it's there's so much mystery. There is so much ambiguity. There's so much room to interpret and discuss both the past and the future for the characters. And so even when we get to the end of the story, there will be survivors, and so you can speculate about what happens for them next. But I think even more interestingly, you're seeing now an adaptation of some of the events in Fire and Blood and House of the Dragon, and there's a lot more going on there. And there's stuff even further back in the past that, with the original Long Night, that I think there will always be room to theorize about.
So, Paramita, this was your kind of you spurred this whole thing. So, where do you think we should start with theories?
So I was in turn inspired by a series of videos made by Alt and various other booktubers with these icebergs. And then, you have the obvious ones or sort of obvious ones, which are supposed to be canon. And then there are others which get more and more tinfoil as we go. So should we start with the one which apparently got the showrunners the job, which is yet not uh, confirmed in the book, which but was apparently confirmed in the show, is which is
Yes.
something that I would request my
Yeah.
fellow panelists to confirm because I've not seen that part of the show. So anyway, it's
Yep.
that Rhaegar and Lyanna are Jon's parents. R+L equals J. Is this
I
actually
think
canon?
so.
Is
Yeah.
it as close to canon as it gets?
I mean,
I
it was
agree.
pretty obvious from the beginning when I first read it. I didn't understand what the mystery was about. That it, the way that Dragon was portrayed, the whole thing in the tournament was so similar to Tristan and Isolde, and it was just the perfect plot, the perfect thing to happen. So there was no mystery there. Hello.
Hello. So sorry for being late. My apologies.
No, that's okay. Can you give us an introduction? And everyone else answered, do you really want this story to end?
First off, hello. I'm Muriel. I'm a small booktuber under the name The Purple Bookworm, and I am a huge A Song of Ice and Fire fan. Very excited to discuss theories from the mundane to the tinfoily. Do I want the story to end? Yes, but also I'd be lying if I said I didn't love the journey and just the crazy places fans have gone into crafting theories. I think that for me as a fan of the series, that's been a huge part of my enjoyment of it. I still want an ending to it, though. At least the main story. That the world will always be there, but I do want an ending to that story.
Muriel, we just sort of got started, and I said, should we start with the beginning one, which is it canon or not? Which is Rhaegar and Lyanna are Jon's parents, which apparently got the showrunners the job, or at least that's what I read from interviews. And I was just asking, and Susanna was just saying that yes, it is sort of
It's
pretty
not canon
obvious
for me
that
until I
that's
see
the
it in
answer.
print. I will die on that hill.
Oh my God, no! You're one of the no. Okay, well, which type of truther are you?
That's very fair.
Well, honestly, I don't really. I don't have super strong feelings about it, but I do. I kind of like the Ashara Dane and Rhaegar Targaryen are Daenerys' parents one. I like it. I'm not saying this. I just like that one. With regards to the showrunners, I do believe that specifically, if I recall correctly, but correct me if I'm wrong, that they guessed Jon's mother correctly, specifically, not his dad.
That is how the wording is laid out. You are right about that. I think the counterpoint to that. Actually, I think there are many counterpoints to that, which is one: who would the father be otherwise? Rhaegar's the only real candidate. I'll admit, I went into the series knowing this, so I was late to the game. I think 5 seasons of the show had aired, and all 5 books had come out. And I actually first was exposed to it by my sister, who I was staying with her. She was living in Washington D.C. at the time. I was just like visiting with her one summer, and she basically sat me down. And I was 14 years old, and she just like talked me through the entire story, including the R+L = J theory before it had ever been laid out, because she was hugely into the fandom. And so I went in knowing about the Red Wedding. I went in knowing about Ned. None of that was a surprise to me. It was still really impactful, but I guess I'm evidence that you can, like, the story just works fundamentally, even if you don't know or even if you know the biggest surprises. Because I think in many ways,
I was same, Carl.
yeah.
I knew about Ned. I was same, Carl.
I think
I knew about Ned. I knew about the Red Wedding.
To circle back to like Rhaegar and Lyanna, I think there's a lot of stuff that I disagree with Susanna in one thing. I don't know that it's necessarily super obvious, at least from the get-go to most readers. I think certainly if you know what you're looking for, it becomes much more obvious. And I think like one of the key things is, one, we know there's like Rhaegar was going for a third child. So surely, just a narrative logic, he had a third child, right? And I guess you could, argue that he had it with the Ashara Dane and it's Daenerys. I don't know that I agree with that, but I think that like the key thing is that Lyanna is consistently associated with blue winter roses.
Yes.
And there are multiple visions of a blue, or maybe there's only one, but there's a lot of
In
association.
the House of the Undying, there is one.
Yep, yeah, and I think that's the key one, right? That Daenerys has of a blue rose growing out of a chink in the wall, and so you're like, okay, well, why is a blue rose growing out of the wall? Lyanna's not alive, unless you're a Lyanna's alive truther. I haven't heard anyone who believes that, but I'm sure they're out there. But then you think, okay, so Lyanna's kid is at the wall. And then, the only other question then is, okay, who's the father? As I guess we're talking about, right? Because the showrunners just had to guess the mother. At least that's the story they told.
Yeah,
And
that's what I know.
so unless we're like arguing, Brandon Stark raped his sister or something, I just don't see any. I mean, we know
Which I have
those are.
seen argued. I've definitely seen that on the internet, I think.
Yeah.
I've seen a lot of things.
Yeah, I honestly same. I've been in some the deepest bowels of the internet, unfortunately, and the Song of Ice and Fire fandom at least. But I just think it just like sometimes Occam's razor, it's right. This simplest or the most straightforward answer is right, and I just think everything we've heard from the outside, including from George himself when he's talking about Jon's parentage, I feel like it's all but. I mean, I don't know that I've read somewhere where he's been like very explicit about it, but it's really all but confirmed in my mind.
Yeah, that's fair. The only thing I just really hate what the show did with like making him a legitimate heir. I just feel like it violates a very important aspect of like his character background. Like being a No, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, it undoes all the character.
Okay.
No, I was just agreeing. That was one thing where I was just like, why would you do this? Why do you
It's like
need
being a
that
bastard is a
particular
very
additional thing?
It's not that a character can't grow, become something else, but growing up as a bastard was fundamental to forming his identity and his sense of self. And like I just feel like at least the way it was developed in the show but then they kind of destroyed every character arc, so yeah.
I don't have strong feelings one way or another. I do think that kind of the narrative argument, I think there are levels to it, which is like one, in the first book, there's a lot of points made about like, the dramatic irony of like Joffrey being an illegitimate bastard, right? And there's actually like some parallels between him and Jon, in particular that first book, towards the start of it. And, I think the idea of Jon in some way being the rightful heir is then, there's an interesting dramatic irony there that he's raised as a bastard. He's raised thinking he's a nobody, but he's actually the one who has like a really great claim to the throne. I also think the whole point is sort of, all the claims really matter is like, who's the strongest, right? I mean, that's Robert Baratheon's, like, he's like distantly related to the Targaryens, but like he won the throne because he was charismatic and he kicked Aerys' ass and, he was kind of their leader, right, in the war. But other than that, I think the other key thing is that Jon is not going to end up the king. And so it's sort of this, again, the like, it's not even like tragedy and I don't know that dramatic irony is the right term either, but it's dramatic that like the person who on paper seems like the deserving king of the Seven Kingdoms ends up, whether willfully or through outside forces, never becoming king and passing it all up. And, I don't think it matters either way though, really, because like a bastard could become a king. Like, it's interesting how in Westeros there's like, it's not that there wasn't historically a stigma against bastardy, because there absolutely was, but like William the Conqueror was a bastard, or the son of a bastard. I forget which. So there's like, there are absolutely cases where you have people who rise up and take over. Also, I'm hearing a slight echo. I don't know if anyone else is. Okay, maybe that's just me. Anyway.
Yeah, it wasn't so bad if it was an acknowledged bastard, and they were common enough that if it was a boy, it was almost as good as being legitimate in Hollywood. So I think having that extra
Right.
just in case, and then you could just get the king to say, oh, yeah, we recognize everything's fine, and you don't need wedlock after all. So it was only a statement when it was convenient to be a statement, like in the case of Jon Snow, because
Yeah.
it's such a big family, and yeah, and because we didn't know who the mother was, so it just made it worse.
I do think it's funny too how John, again, like his bastardy is such a big part of his character and informs all the decisions he makes. And it seems like sort of a dead end for him. At least that's how he views it in the first book. And, he's constantly treated poorly because of it. But like you look at the history of Westeros, and there are a lot of, and like even in the main series, there are like incredibly powerful bastards who rose up to positions of prominence. Not least, you look historically again to talk about a bastard who almost became king, which is Aemon in the Blackfire rebellions.
Yeah. Yeah.
Daemon, sorry, it's Daemon Blackfire, right? Yeah.
I think so.
Anyway, do we want to move on to another theory? Unless anyone has other thoughts about R+L = J.
No, the one thing I will say though is, I like some of those fringe like parentage theories, but I'm not super invested about it one way or the other. One theory I do like though is just Lemongate as a whole. What is it? Well, it's an element that can contribute to different theories, I suppose. But the Lemongate thing of the whole lemon trees and bravos, and there's just something that doesn't quite add up in Daenerys' backstory. I like that. And it seems like it's one of the only bits of like speculation that Martin has actually come out and said, "You're onto something there," but I won't say more because obviously.
Can you explain that? What's up with the lemon trees in the?
So the lemon trees is the whole thing where Daenerys, when she thinks about her childhood, one of the only memories that brings her comfort and something she just kind of goes back to in her mind when she's faced with a difficult situation, like, oh, I want to go back to the house in Bravos with the red door by which grew a lemon tree, and you're given to understand that this house was in Bravos, but then there are several points in the series where it's like very specifically pointed out, Bravos is too far north for lemon trees to grow, and lemon trees and citrus fruit in general are more something you would find in a southern hot place like Dawn. There are other bits of it as well. Apparently she, I can't remember the exact details, but she explains the route her and her brother took as like fugitive children through the Free Cities, and I know at least I saw one video that kind of showed it didn't quite make sense given the geography of the Free Cities. But this whole thing, specifically with the house with the red door and the lemon tree, the fact that she remembers it being in Bravos, but a lot of people have pointed out it couldn't really have been in Bravos given the climate.
Huh.
And someone asked the question to Martin, and Martin responded in a blog post, I believe, or live journal entries, and he said, "Yeah, there's something there." Like he actually said that there's something with the lemon trees, the citrus fruit, but then obviously he didn't provide any further details. And so this bit is like used in other theories, I suppose, but it's been dubbed Lemongate, which I kind of like the name. So that's one I kind of like. Okay, yeah, this one seems at least to point to something actually relevant.
I wasn't aware of that one, so thank you. Pay more attention.
Muriel,
yeah, there are lots of essays and videos, so it's fun to look into.
Is that then where you're? I mean, the Daenerys is Rhaegar and Achar's kid being, then she would be in Dorne. Is that the idea?
Well, maybe not. It doesn't have specifically to like uphold a parentage theory, but it could potentially point to Daenerys not having been in Bravo. She could have been sheltered in Dawn, or some people do use that element as part of a broader theory that Daenerys could not be Daenerys, the daughter of Rhaela and Aerys. Is that Aerys II and Rhaela Targaryen, that she's not their daughter. But that means obviously that there's something incorrect about the recollections she shares of her childhood in the books. And I guess you can extrapolate from that. But the basic element is still with this memory of the house with the red door, which she recollects fondly. It's like the one time in her life where she felt safe and had an actual childhood. And the knight who took care of them, I can't remember his name. And so, and there was a lemon tree growing by this house. But it's like, no, but there aren't lemon trees in Bravo. So that's, yeah.
Yeah, the most mundane version of explanation I've seen is that she just was in Volantis. And I guess that geographically lemon trees maybe could grow in Volantis, but I don't know what the purpose would be other than like to some, thematic degree. I think it's clearly about the idea that like this imagined idealized childhood never existed, and that like, it's going to tie into the idea that she's going to come to Westeros and be viewed as, a tyrant, and that all of these sort of like fantasies she's created in her head are not real. They're fantasies. It's kind of, I think, in parallel with Sansa's story, right? Where you see a lot of kind of deconstruction of these classic chivalric tropes. But I've never read a version of the theory that satisfied me, and so that is one of the whole idea of Lemongate is something that really intrigues me as well, because I think, as you mentioned, Muriel, like George has been very explicit about, there is something there. And so I'm curious, is it really like something minor, or is it, it seems like there's
that's the thing we don't know.
Right.
But,
so yeah, I don't know. That is an interesting one. I have read some of I think when season 8 was still coming out, I read a version of the theory that Daenerys is the Blackfire, not Aegon, and that
I think I've seen that as well.
She is.
Oh wow!
I don't even remember who the parents are. If it's just reversing that theory. So one of the theories for Aegon, who is introduced in Dance with Dragons,
Phaegon.
Phaegon is. I certainly think he's Phaegon, right? I mean,
I think he's Phaegon too. I subscribe to Phaegon. Yeah.
Yeah, but the most I think.
Oh, totally fake. Yeah.
Susanna, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, for that, the key general ideas is, one, George introduced the Blackfires relatively late into the game. Two, like, why is the Golden Company helping
the
Targaryen when they notoriously have fought the Targaryens in the Blackfire rebellions? And then, 3, I actually recently saw someone, I can't remember who on Reddit, but went to like some college that has a lot of George's records. And in one of the earlier versions of Dance with Dragons, in one of Tyrion's chapters where he's on the boat, on the Rhoyne, I believe it is, with Aegon, or at that point he's just young Griff.
Young Griff.
Young Griff is getting a history lesson about the Blackfires. And it eventually changed and he cut it because it was like, probably seemed too obvious. He also has like a hidden like Illyrio, who's kind of the he's the merchant who helped Daenerys and Viserys, and he has a present, a gift or something for Aegon when he arrives in Westeros, which a lot of people theorize is Blackfire the sword, which was last held by Daemon Blackfire and has gone missing and no one knows what happened to it. And I think the most common theory for Phaegon's parentage, assuming that he is fake and not the son of Rhaegar and Martell, is that he is the child of Illyrio and
his wife Sarah, I think.
Yeah, and Sarah, who we know
Sarah would have been herself a Blackfire descendant.
Right, exactly, because we know the books are very explicit about the male line of Blackfires died out. But that leaves open, the implication
Yep.
that the female line is still alive. And we know Illyrio from Tyrion's, I think, like very first chapter in Dan's, like deeply loved. He has like this, Illyrio has this statue of this beautiful woman, and named Sarah, who all we know about her is that Illyrio, she was the love of Illyrio's life. And then we also coincidentally, Illyrio is funding the return, the conquest of this little Targaryen child. Why? Maybe because he's his kid, and he's willing to like lie to help his son sit on the Iron Throne. And so I certainly, as far as a Song of Ice and Fire theories go, that's one of the ones that I'm like most confident is true. Any
there's a theory which I think is plausible, which is there's this tournament where this knight sort of has, you can't see the face. And it says that knight of the laughing tree was Lyanna, actually. Yeah. Do you think that's plausible? I actually found that surprisingly plausible.
Given what we're told about her personality. Kind of tracks.
And not least, again, to go back to R+L J, but like, why did Rhaegar at the tourney at Harrenhal, not give the crown of the Queen of Love and Beauty to his wife, who was sitting right there, and instead gave it to this little Stark girl? Well, probably because he found out that because the whole idea of the Knight of the Laughing Tree, right, is that he quote, right, because everyone thinks it's a man, fought off these bullies, right, and essentially made a show of it, and like made a point to be like, don't be dicks to Howland Reed in particular. And we're talking about Ashara Dane. I'm a big fan of the idea that Howland Reed and Ashara Dane fell in love at Harrenhal, and that he is the father of her child. I don't know if she's alive or not.
I'm not sure about that either. Kind of.
She's a big mystery because she is.
Yeah.
She clearly matters to some degree because she continues to be brought up. Barristan Selmy is now in love with her as of the 5th book, and so I think there's something there. And Howland Reed clearly is important because one, he was at the Tower of Joy with Ned, so he knows about whatever baby was found there, John. But whatever baby was there. So I think, clearly there's more going on with, I think, both of them. Maybe they're not connected, but, I think that's an interesting possibility. It also is sort of, I think, dramatic and subversive in that, like, Howland Reed is this little, like, ugly frog man, and, Ashara is this, like, famously beautiful lady. And so the idea of, like, these two falling in love, I think, George is a big fan of Beauty and the Beast, and, you see it with Jaime and Brienne, and which I have famously is a strong word, but I have defended them as a romantic relationship as opposed to just a friendship. Steve, for listeners, you can't see Steve shaking his head. He hates romance and love, and I'm here for the true love that is Jaime and Brienne. Which I guess that's a theory now too, right? Because it hasn't happened in the book.
I prefer them as friends, as platonic friends.
You guys are all lame. No, you were all lame.
No. Just keep them. They make no sense together. They're unless as friends. To turning into a romance, it just ruined the whole thing. It's like people don't understand relationships. It just ruined everything they had, and then got into this romance that it was ruined. So I think that pissed me off more than Arya killing the Night King. I was so furious with that.
Oh, but that was terrible, though.
Even though there's so much setup for it in the books, they think of each other naked all the time. They literally bathe together.
Yeah, because they're on the road together and they're not bathtub together naked. So of course they're gonna think of each other naked. That doesn't mean that they are soulmates.
How many of your friends are you thinking about naked all the time? I don't know about you, but big thing, their arc. Okay, again, Beauty and the Beast. George famously loves Beauty and the Beast. 2, the idea of like Brienne in some ways bringing out the heroic knight that Jaime could have been, and maybe could be again, is like I think is really dramatically interesting and is room for I love it.
I want Jamie to get away from Cersei. I want that for him, and it's kind of happening already as part of his arc of just kind of detaching himself from his toxic as fuck sister. But to me, I don't know. I'm kind of like, oh, it's a beautiful platonic friendship, him and Brienne. I'm not sold on like a romance for them. Oh,
They're in
I
love.
need a lot more development.
They're in love.
Please, at least we have already got like 200 open arcs. If he spends time on
You've read
Jaime,
Dance,
Brienne,
right?
and
Like it's already
we are-
happening.
we
They
are
are
in lot of
actively
trouble.
together, and Brienne is seemingly betrayed Jaime. Like that's exactly where their story is going. Their story was connected from the end of Clash and has been connected
Yeah.
both when they're together and apart. Who does Jaime think about as much as he thinks about Cersei? Brienne. He thinks about Brienne all the time in Feast. It's like their arcs are fundamentally connected. They're like Brienne. I almost feel was like introduced to be this counterpoint to Jaime in some way, because she's just like she doesn't really come to the forefront of the story until like she's kind of a side character in Catelyn's story, and then from book 3 onward she's like one of the main characters.
Why can't their arcs be intertwined as best buddies?
I mean, they could be.
Yeah, I'm going to use this mention of, which is true, that Brienne seemingly betrayed Jaime, to ask something which is not really, it can still be a theory, but not in the show. So Jon does come back, right? As of Dance, he's gone, but then everybody thinks he's going to come back. My question is that, as far as I know from what I've seen in videos, the show didn't really touch upon any changes as a result of this process. But we've seen that in the books, when Lady Stoneheart comes back, she who used to be Catelyn Stark, she's tremendously changed and a tremendously terrifying personality. So what's happening with Jon? And related, why is everybody in the fandom obsessed with wargs? Why is everything warging into everything? I'm so confused about wargs.
Well, so here's my theory. My theory is that
too many wargs.
I don't necessarily want Jon to come back, but I think that's pretty much guaranteed. However, I feel like
I think he'll come back and we'll get Melisandre's POV, right? Because that's.
But I want a point of view
from
at
the end of the 5th book.
Yeah,
I feel like basically Jon's soul is like resting in Ghost, because
100%.
the thing is too, and I don't really know the timeline publication wise, but almost. Oh, sorry. Kind of spoiler for Realm of the Elderlings and the Farseer trilogies, but there's basically almost exactly the same thing happens in Farseer. Yeah. And when I read Farseer, I was like, wait, hold up. And I feel like, so this is exactly what's going to happen. Jon's soul, spirit, whatever, is just kind of like chilling in Ghosts. I want that to have an effect on him. His personality needs to be affected by this, like, almost death state. Because you see that with Catelyn Stark is like the extreme example. She's basically like a rage-fueled, a bit above a zombie. And then you've got Beric Dondarrion, who very explicitly states, every time I am brought back from death, the afterlife, the void, whatever, a piece of me is left in death. And I'm less myself and I'm less human. It's like there are consequences to bringing people back from death. The show did not commit to that at all. So I presumably something would happen in the books.
I think they tried to. I just think they failed. They made him like sadder.
Yeah.
Like he like never smiles starting in season 6. He's just like, however broody he was before then, he's like the biggest bummer after that. And I, I do think
Yeah.
he's going to come back different, partially just out of the nature of being resurrected and how traumatic it is, and how traumatically he died. Partially,
Yeah, that too, because he's stabbed by like how many times is he stabbed? It's
a
kind of
lot.
crazy, right?
Yeah, he gets Julius Caesared. But I do think that there is, you know, the situation is different, right? One, Catelyn was already basically crazy by the time she died. Like if you read her, like in Storm particularly, like she is just she thinks Bran and Rickon are dead. She thinks her girls are probably dead. You know, and then suddenly she thinks it's just all over. They've all lost, right? And she she literally dies like cutting her own face.
Absolute despair. Yeah.
So I think things will be a bit different for Jon, whose one body is going to be preserved by the wall. Ice preserves, like we have a lot of lines about that, and clearly the wall is magic and things, and that he is in ghosts, so in some way his spirit didn't fully die. But that said, I think it will change him, and I would be shocked if he isn't like a darker character and wins. I almost imagine that his arc will be like finding his humanity again. Like reuniting with his siblings. I could imagine particularly Arya might help both of them. I mean, again, talking about theories, I think Arya is also, I think all the characters are on a dark negative trajectory towards the end, right? Like Daenerys at the end is all like, dragons don't plant trees, fire and blood. I think she's going to become much more violent, much more comfortable with violence. I think Jon is going to come back traumatized and wolfish and violent himself. I think, Arya is clearly becoming an assassin. Sansa is under Littlefinger's wing. So, she could very easily become much more manipulative and callous. And I think, that's kind of going to be their dark point and wins. And I do think in this theoretical Dream of Spring, a lot of the characters will find their heroic side again more and come together and, I don't think it'll be all happy, sunshine and roses, but I do think that there will be a triumphant aspect to it.
I expect bittersweetness, so there will be a lot of bitterness, but there will be a point of sweetness as well.
Right. George has openly talked about he's going for that Tolkien-esque ending, right? Of the like what you get at Return of the King, where it's like it's kind of sad and like people cry at the ending, but it's also like the good guys beat Sauron and destroyed the ring.
Yeah.
So there's something there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Speaking of people who, this is another theory which I feel, it is still technically a theory since it's not confirmed, but it's pretty rock solid that the quiet, well, the mute brother at the Quiet Isle is Sandor Clegane. I think that's another theory that seems pretty. Seems pretty clear that that's what's going on.
With the link and
and also this one, what is his name? Kyvern. The guy he brought back.
Yeah, but it's
Robert
never confirmed, is it? Right? But I think that's pretty obvious.
No, I think in the show I read that they say, but then I think there's a theory related to that, because what's the point of like bringing? I think there's a theory called Untorment, which is basically that Tormund dies and then Cersei sort of uses Qyburn to resurrect Tormund, who is not really Tormund. That's deep in the iceberg.
He kills himself.
That's deep in the iceberg. How does Tormund die in the show?
Defenestration. Yeah.
No, I think Robert is definitely.
And how does Marcella? What happens to Marcella in the show?
Poisoned.
Yeah. Oh yeah, she's poisoned. Right.
It's the kid.
Yeah, she's killed.
That doesn't make it. But that doesn't make sense. Why?
It does.
I've heard
to be fair, my own opinion is that the books aren't much better in that regard. I think Dorne is the weakest plot in the whole series. But
I like the Dornish characters.
I like Arianne, and the Sand Snakes are intriguing, but like Arya Hota, in the fandom he's called the camera that rides because he has no personality and yet he's POVs. And what's his name? Eris Oakheart is just like
Yes.
kind of there, and then he's dead, and you're like, why do we even like? I don't care.
Yeah, he's
I
kind
don't
of
care
Yeah,
about
it was
him.
such a point. I mean, just for one point, created the whole character, and it's just unnecessary.
There's no reason. George, you could tell at that point that he just wasn't listening to his editor and didn't have to. But no, in the show, it makes sense for those characters the way they write them. They're just like fundamentally different in the books. Is it Ilaria Sand, who is Oberyn's lover and is basically like, I want to get revenge on the Lannisters for killing Jaime, so I'm going to kill the Cersei's daughter. And it's like, it's a horrible psychotic move, but like, you're like, well, this version of the character is much more ruthless. And, she's like, it's not like great, but I do think it makes sense in the context of the show. It's not a high point, certainly.
That's basically the opposite of how she's in the books, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because like in the book, she's about, she's looking at save the little children, and it's like, no, peace. We don't want this violence. Stop it.
Right.
Which is interesting.
The Sand Snakes, though, I mean, they're the wild card, right? And I think that's the one aspect of the books that I do think is particularly more interesting in the show, because they are scattered to the winds. Like, as of the end of Dance, I think even the end of Feast, they're like all around Westeros. And, there's a theory that Alaris, the Sphinx,
I believe it's Sorella, yeah.
Yeah, which is like, to me, that's just obvious, because it's literally like, once you realize that Aurelis backwards is Sorella, Sorella Sand is one of the Sand Snakes, you're like, oh yeah, that's her. Like, that's what's going on there. And, we know, I think it's Tyene is sent to King's Landing, and she's like the one who's like a poisoner. And so you're like, okay, so she's going to poison someone, or at least try to poison
Does she
someone.
pass herself as a scepter, maybe? Is that the...
I don't remember the details.
Her mother was a scepter?
Yeah, I think
there's a connection with the religious people,
yes,
I think.
I think it is her mother was a septa. But she's supposed to be like the sweet one, but she's like into poisons, and she's like best friends with Arianne, I believe.
Yeah.
And I forget the third one. The third one's out there somewhere. I don't remember. Obara, yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
So they're a wild card. I definitely think.
And then there's the Dark Star that pops up at one point.
Talking about wild cards, yeah, Dark Star is around. I don't know what's going to happen with him. I think he's going to be how we get Dawn, which is the big sword of, wielded by the Sword of the Morning. And, I think that's how the Danes are going to factor in. I think he's going to like steal it or claim it, somehow. But other than that, I have no idea. Because he's just there. I don't know, man.
I don't know.
He cuts off a little girl's ear. We'll see what he does.
I'm going to suggest going deeper into the iceberg and give the floor to Susanna.
Yeah, I'm
Tyrion Targaryen.
I'm sticking to it. I think I'm right.
You're a Tyrion Targaryen.
You're Tyrion Targaryen. Okay.
I know. Apparently, it's so wrong, but I had this feeling the first time I read it, and then watching the show, kind of forgot about it. And as I reread it, the same passages, it's the way that it's written, as much as the things that are focused on. Now that after Tywin has died, and you understand the relationship between the two, and why Tyrion is the way that he is, and etc. etc. And I went and checked the dates, and it makes sense. Suddenly, their relationship makes complete sense. Even his appearance, because he's not just a dwarf, he's deformed. And there's a long history of stillbirths and deformed fetus in the Targaryens. Also a long history of women dying in childbirth. It's horrible being part dragon, I guess. And why would Tywin hate him so much? Just because he's a dwarf? Because he's ugly? They are so alike. That's what he hates about him. And Tywin was a man that he valued competence and merit and hard work, and And Tyrion is all those things. He's intelligent, he's competent, and his flaw, his propensity for, you know, women of loose morals, it's part of the trauma that he suffered with his wife, that it was caused by his father, who is the one with, you know, the predilection. It comes from his own father. We learn all these things. And yeah, it makes sense. He has a Targaryen's personality. He has, the looks. Even in the first book, it's mentioned that his hair is not blonde like the brothers; that it's almost white. He thinks like a Targaryen, and all that hate from the father doesn't make sense, because he should love him, because people like, and he hates him because he. And he says at the end that you're no son of mine, and I can't prove that you're not my son, things like that. And we know that the Mad King coveted, what was the wife's, the mother's name, I forget.
Joanna.
Yeah.
Several times that he took liberties with her, and yeah, it just adds up. The lion has 3 heads. So the dragon has 3 heads, and that's definitely one of the heads, I think. Another thing, Varys. I'm not convinced that Varys was not aware that, the Jon Snow, Lyanna, Ragnar situation, but he is in, I guess it's hard to tell with Varys, but he is in favor of getting a Targaryen on the throne. And who's the only person that he likes in King's Landing, and the only person that, he's a friend, the only person that he goes out of his way to help, even to make him more comfortable, is Tyrion. I don't know, to me it makes sense. I would love. I might be wrong, but I would love to be right.
So the thing with the Tyrion Targaryen theory, I do think it's very plausible. I just don't really like it much, mostly because of again, I guess maybe it's oversimplifying character backgrounds, character motivations, but I feel like there's this interesting parallel between Tyrion and Jon Snow, where Jon Snow wants so much to be the son of Ned Stark. Like, he loves this man so much as his adoptive father. But he's not his son, right? He's a bastard. And with Tyrion, you basically have the reverse of it's almost at one point he's like, I wish Tywin was not my father.
Mm-hmm.
But then that he would be his son. But indeed, their personalities are actually very similar in some ways, or at least the level of intelligence, of cunning, planning, pattern thinking and planning things. He's arguably, of the 3, the one child who's most like Tywin. I feel like him being a Targaryen, I mean, I guess you could argue, well, he was still raised by Tywin, so, functionally he's still his son, and it still kind of works, but I don't know. But I will concede that it is very plausible. It's one of the more plausible theories. And there is that whole thing as well, where you're also told that Tywin and Aerys were bestest buds.
Mm-hmm.
They were best friends, and something happened. And indeed, Aerys coveted Joanna Lannister, and Joanna Lannister was Tywin's huge love of his life. So there's definitely something dodgy that happened, and so I will agree that it is very plausible. I don't know that I would love it if it were true, but Varys, I agree though. Varys is just, I feel like Varys remains very mysterious now. You can't really quite pin him down. Peter Baelish is a bit more scrutable because, okay, he's a power-hungry sociopath.
Mm-hmm.
Again, oversimplifying a tad, but that's basically Varys. He kind of I'm there for the people. But are you? And then he's in cahoots with Illyrio Mopatis. I don't know. It's just I'm still kind of I'm not sure.
He's an altruistic sociopath.
I think
it's kind of hard to.
Yeah, Varys, I'm not convinced is as altruistic as he is in the show.
Yeah.
I think, I don't even know that he's as pro-Targaryen. There's the theory that he's a Blackfire or is in some way aligned with them. He very nearly gets Daenerys killed in the first book, and he's spying on her for Robert through
Yeah.
Jorah Mormont, and him being pro Target, like clearly he's aligned with Illyrio. That much we know as early as book one, where Arya overhears them talking together. He's definitely mysterious. I'm not sure about Varys in general, but regarding Tyrion Targaryen, I also personally don't like it, just because I like the idea that, like, in every way he's Tywin's son and Tywin hates him. But I do think that is one of those things that we definitely didn't get in the show that very much could be possible in the books. My own thought is that it's part of George's gardening, where he is very consciously laying these seeds. He just doesn't know if he's going to let them sprout. I think this is something where it's so, like, it's like Jon's parentage. Like, when you dig into it, it seems like such an obvious thing. And so I think he is very aware of it, and I don't think it's just like strictly a red herring. I think it is something that he is keeping open as a possibility, and we'll find out, if we get the books eventually, or if he dies and like leaves notes or something like that, what his thoughts were. But I think he's uncertain, or at least was uncertain, as of writing Dance with Dragons, and I definitely think it's a possibility, because, like you said, I mean, the one other physical feature you mentioned, Susanna, is he has one black eye and one green eye, which is, famously in the Dance with Dragons, right? The two sides, the blacks and the greens, and their colors associated with Daenerys' dragons, and
I didn't think of that.
there's a lot, right? There's
Oh wow, yeah.
I didn't spot that either. But yeah, I would be so bummed, because all of Tyrion's arc, he's actually the kinslayer. Like, he killed his father. It's one of the that immediately goes. His crimes are not any less, because Tywin still did what he did. But that additional guilt of, being guilty of patricide, if that's taken away, it takes a big part of his descent in dance, especially. He's down a very, very dark
I think
so I don't know
the other
that,
side of the
but yeah,
theory
it
too
could
is
very well
that,
be possible.
and I think it's less likely, but it's actually a theory. My sister is a Jaime and Cersei Targaryen truther. She is a big fan, and that's the other side, is that it's, the dramatic irony of, like,
I've seen that one.
Ares, or not Ares. Well, Ares is involved, but Tywin, is convinced that Tyrion isn't his son, right, and hates him, and blah blah blah. But it's actually the twins, who are, otherworldly beautiful, like most of the Targaryens, have their weird incest kink. They have a lot of traits that you would associate with Targaryens, right? Including Cersei is clearly going mad, and she has this obsession with wildfire, like Ares did.
Yeah.
And, like, what's his name? Bright Flame. Arion Bright Flame? That sounds right.
Yes.
Yes. And, so there is a lot of parallels between, Cersei and Ares, and just in general, the twins and the Targaryens. And I don't think the timeline necessarily adds up for that. I remember looking at it and seeing it, like, it doesn't really make sense. Like, but you never know, right? I do believe, actually, Tywin, specifically, what we get about Ares taking liberties with Joanna is at their wedding, I think. Tywin and Joanna's, I want to say, is like, that was the quote. I may be mistaken, though. And so, if so, I do believe Cersei and Jaime are born sometime relatively after that, but I don't know. I may be mistaken about that. But that's another side of that theory, right? Of that, a child or children of Tywin are in fact Ares's, presumably by rape, right?
Yeah.
I don't know.
That's the implication.
And I mean, one thing is, I mean, this is one of someone's right to rule by birth, and someone's right to rule by virtue of who they are. And I think in Feast, it's Jenna Lannister whom Jaime just comes across, and she says that, "Oh, Jaime, it's not you. Tywin's son is Tyrion, and he is the actual son. And depending on perspective, what Susanna said, like it could either be a red herring, it could be George leading us down, being confident that yes, that is what we're supposed to do, or it could actually be true. And I don't know either way. But the whole who has the right to rule by virtue of birth is a big thing. Because even just going back to Lemongate, one of the implications is that if Daenerys is who believes that she is the rightful heir to the Iron Throne, if her parentage is not that, does it undermine everything else? I could see that totally destabilizing her and almost, uh, either leading her to do something drastic or even causing a mental imbalance. I don't know, but I mean that's the kind of thing. Like her identity is totally built on this, that she is
I think
a
that
Targ, and if she's not, can she handle it? I don't know.
Would be even more impactful in some ways is just the idea that like no one, she has built up, she's proven herself, she has this army, she has this power, and just no one takes her seriously or views her as the enemy. That it's not even that, like, it's the same thing that happens to Rhaenyra, right? That like you're a woman, and in Daenerys' case, it's even more extreme because she is literally an outsider, and she's going to come in with this foreign army of who the Westeros are going to view as savages, eunuchs and horse riding cavalry, and like it's just like all of the. She's just going to seem like a freak to them, right? And then
she
on
does
top
have
of
3 nukes, though.
right? Exactly, right? And people are going to be fucking terrified of the dragons, and I think, I feel like it's hardly even a theory to say that she's not going to be welcome in Westeros, right? Like that's going to be the big conflict for her when she crosses the Narrow Sea, and I certainly don't think that's going to end happily, whether she goes mad or just becomes tyrannical or what. I just don't think she's going to have a happy ending. She very much seems to me a tragic character in kind of a Shakespearean fashion. And I think I almost feel it is more dramatically satisfying if she is in many ways the true claimant, and absolutely no one gives her the time of day. Except for obviously her allies, her army, right? But like, no other lords in Westeros, are like, yeah, we'll welcome you. Like, we want a queen. No, they're not. Like, they're sexist. They're going to hate her for being foreign, essentially. They're going to be afraid of her dragons. Because the last time dragons, when dragon dance, what's the line? When dragon dance, like people die or like the commons burn. There's some quote, and I think her character is screwed, unfortunately.
I have a slightly more optimistic. It's probably wrong, but I in that case I would prefer a much happier ending. Like the first Targaryen, when it came over, it just conquered. It just took Westeros by force, pretty much. It just. I would like to see Dany as almost being invited. So once things got out of control in the north, and they realize, oh shit, there's more important things going on than just bickering about who's on the throne, and they will need the dragons, and maybe she will come by invitation or as a savior instead of a conqueror, which might be a good thing or not, because she's so set in conquer and rule, and to have to change the, even though sure she's been breaking change, etc., but I think if they turn her down or don't give her enough credits because she's an outsider or you just don't take her seriously, eventually they will have to, and they will have to ask her for help, and that's kind of as it happens in the show. I don't think it's going to happen quite that way. Sure, Jon Snow might play a part, but I think even in that, Tyrion is the one that's going to be the mediator, because Jon Snow is no politician. He has no tact to deal with any situation. It doesn't require sword or honor.
I disagree with that. His entire arc in Dance with Dragons is becoming a politician and a leader of men.
I think I think he's probably a bit more skilled. I mean, I think he learns quite a lot in a short amount of time. He has to, probably not enough since he does get stabbed, but I think he does try.
But it does have a stark temperament. You know, it's all about the honor and duty. It's a bit rigid. I don't see him as a leader. I mean, look what happened when he became a leader. You know, he was competent. You know, he got to command the wall, but it wasn't enough. You know, he was a good commander, but he just got stabbed.
Counterpoint to that: one, Ned was a beloved leader, and things only went wrong when he went south. Two, Jon, like Ned, hid away a baby. That is not a very honorable thing to do.
But he could get away with it because he was a man. He could get away. That was not a blemish on his character, except for the reader who knew his character, who knew just how honorable he was, and of course he would not have better. There was that.
It's not honorable. Like that's a callous, but very political, and I do think ultimately moral. But it's. The ethics of it, I think, are questionable, and I think Jon is also much more intelligent in the books than he is portrayed in the show. In the show, he's like an action hero, but in the books, you get this sense. Like on top of that, he's ambitious in the books. Like he wanted to be Lord.
Ned Stark wasn't. That's the thing. He had no ambitions. He was the second son. He was very happy to just live his life with Ashara. Poor girl killed herself. Heartbreak. He had no ambitions to be Lord of anything, and Jon, on the other hand, it tries not to, but maybe because he was born so put down, so segregated, he has that fire, he has the ambition, Targaryen ambition. But that's the honor of the Starks, which
was Ned a good leader though? I mean,
yes,
in his in the north maybe, but when he went down south with the professionals. He was weak.
Okay, but come on. That's
rolled.
condescending to the North, first of all, who have their own political climate and their own. Ned had worked for decades. He led a war. I mean, it was basically him and Robert and Jon Arryn leading Robert's rebellion, and he was very successful as a military leader. On top of that, when he goes south, he generally worked pretty well. He just got screwed by trusting Littlefinger, right?
With politics, he was good in battle and strategy, and he's good in the North because they all share the same kind of philosophy. But when it came to politics, he was
too honest.
They preyed on him. I mean,
he was flawed, but I also think in many ways he was effective. Like he did his job. He uncovered mysteries. Like he almost beat Cersei. The only reason Cersei ended up winning was because Littlefinger turned on him. Like that was the big mistake, the fatal flaw. I don't even think confronting Cersei, I think that was a mistake probably, but like a forgivable one if Littlefinger hadn't betrayed him. And he only trusted Littlefinger because Catelyn told him to, right? And Catelyn was like, well, he's my childhood friend and he's in love with me, which should have been a red flag.
Yeah.
But, it's Littlefinger is one of those characters that I just think George is convinced. He's talked about how he's like, oh, he's not that suspicious. Everyone, thinks he's harmless, blah, blah, blah. That's how he's written. But like literally from the first book, he's like creeping on Sansa. He's like, I've heard people criticize the show as saying Littlefinger is too sus in the show as compared to the books. But like, I've always felt that Littlefinger is like so creepy from the get go. Yes. And it's George, maybe what he was doing in his head was not the same as what was actually on the page, where you have this like, clear, pedophile, liar, manipulator. I mean, he literally runs a brothel. Like
he runs a brothel,
he's not trustworthy, and I think that's the biggest mistake.
He's definitely not trustworthy. But I also think Ned telling Cersei and trying to show that mercy because of what happened before. I understand why he did it. But I don't think that made any sense from a
And
strategic
when did
point
he
of
do
view.
that?
Morally,
Before
yes,
Robert died.
but strategically,
How
no.
could he predict that Robert was going to die? Ned got screwed by bad events because the plot called for it. You know, I don't think Ned is an idiot. I think Ned is flawed, and he's not like a
fair
genius manipulator. But I think his competence or incompetence rather is exaggerated.
No.
I think
Yeah, I would agree with that.
he got screwed by really bad circumstances, and you know.
Yeah. No, that I agree. And I mean, in book one, Ned is one of my favorite POVs. I didn't like any of the kids. I mean, Arya was still okay, but Sansa, oh my god. But I was going to say something which is probably not that popular, or I don't know, maybe it is. As the book progressed, in book one, I quite liked it, but as the book progressed, I can't stand Jon's chapters. They just annoy the hell out of me. I'm just like, let's move. Let's move. I can see this. Let's move. So when Melisandre came in, I was like, yes, you're a terrifying person, but I can read about you. This is a horrible thing to say, but yeah, there's something very, very monotonous. I don't know what it is about Jon's about the tone of Jon's chapters, which just bogs me down. And I'm like, oh, not again. And a close second, which again is very unpopular because that's where all the interesting lore is.
I don't like French
like don't like.
But the Children of the Forest, though.
Go on.
They were very disappointing.
I
they were very.
I selectively like Brand's chapters. I feel like he either has some of the most interesting chapters or some of the most boring. Like I reread Clash recently, and he has so many chapters where he's just sitting around and like, I'm miserable because I'm crippled. I am so sad. I am so crippled. And that's like, and nothing happened. And he has the same dream about the three-eyed raven, and that's it. Or the three-eyed crow, I think it is in the book or something. It's like, that's like all it is in book 2. And then I think book 5, actually, his stuff is really interesting. And I also think Jon's stuff is really interesting.
It is interesting, which is what I'm coming to. And I'm going to pair these two together because they both freak the hell out of me. And I want all of you collectively to tell me. Yeah, I want all of you collectively to tell me that both of these theories are wrong. One is Jojen paste.
I don't know the name.
I'm sorry, what was
and one is spray pie. Okay, so Jojen is missing, and the idea is that, and Bran was fed this particular.
It's like a paste made from weirwood.
Yeah. And the theory is that that's Jojen.
And it has a strange consistency, and it induces magical. I think it is a mixture of the weirwood tree and Jojen. I fully believe it.
I fully believe that as well.
Wow, I hadn't heard that one. So it's like a reference to South Park, the Cartman's chili thing.
That's, oh my god, the secret South Park reference. I mean, George wouldn't be past George. He put a reference to the Jets. That's his football team, right? And you know the giant. One of the giants is named 11, which is like the number 11 of this. It's George, and you know all the Tullys who are named after the Sesame Street characters. There's some goofy lore. Anyway, Parmita, what was the second one?
Frey pie.
The Frey pie. I think there are these 3 Freys who go missing, and after that, they are fed these. They are fed these pies, and the idea is that it's a kind of tragic thing where the Freys are fed their own.
I think that one is more likely.
Please refute
the first one, I mean, it could be, but what would be the point?
Magic.
There's some kind of thing that he gains powers because, it's kind of the same idea as why Melisandre insists on sacrifice.
Blood magic.
Human sacrifice is supposed to.
We do see in Bran's visions, in those same chapters, he sees a human sacrifice happen in front of a weirwood tree. So we know that the old gods' magic, whatever the old gods are, if they're actually gods, or just like spirits of ancestors, or
Eldritch
the children of
beings.
the forest, whatever.
Yeah.
The idea is that that nature
The hive
magic
mind.
uses blood magic. It is a part of
Yeah.
it, so it would not be unusual, or I don't think it's beyond the pale. Well, it's beyond the pale normally, but like I think it's possible. And
Also, Jojen is a green seer, so he's like himself kind of quote
True.
unquote magical, right? Mystical to a certain extent. I feel like, I don't know, it makes sense given the children of the forest don't really. I'm kind of, I don't know that it's a theory as such, but I wouldn't necessarily think the children of the forest have the interests of humanity at heart. That they care about the survival of humanity, given they were fucked over by human beings. So I don't think a child of the forest would be like, I'm going to feed another human to this human. What do I give a shit?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's a very good point. The children of the forest, I was impressed, and they could have easily be the bad guys. I mean, they created
Yeah.
all the troubles. Let's say, and let's be honest, they were the cause of everything. So if they were capable of that, if it was accidental or unintentional, or things got out of hand, but they had powers. They were very powerful, and so what else
Yeah.
would they be able to do? There's still all these places in Westeros that are warded by their old magic. So, yeah.
Frey pie, I feel like it. But I can't. The problem is I can't really remember where exactly that would take place in the series. But I feel like it, because there's this whole tale in at one point that Bran is sort of like the people, like the kin eaters, or like someone who was, I can't remember the exact story, but someone was fed their children, and that was like a big no-no. Like that's like that's like obscene and insulting to the gods, and that's a big no-no. You just don't do that. Bad. So I feel like having the phrase "do that against their will," like bringing on maybe the ire of the gods on their house. I feel like, okay, yeah, that I could see that being a thing.
Yeah, because they
It's
betrayed
the
the guest,
rat
right?
king?
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
fitting.
Yeah, it's just another violation, a big taboo that
The Rat King, I believe, is the name of the story, and it happens in the show.
Yeah, but
So I think that doesn't guarantee it,
Yeah.
but I think that makes it increasingly possible. Like
Yeah.
the showrunners could have just come up with that themselves, or they could have heard that from George, or intuited that from the books and decided we're going to have Arya bake Freys into a pie, and feed it to Walder. I think both of those are likely, and I think cannibalism is. We're getting into winter. I think this isn't the last time you're going to see
that's another
cannibalism.
thing.
People are going to eat people. George
There's
Fred's fucked up
precedent
stuff.
in the books, in the series lore, in any case, for that kind of.
Yeah, it's gonna be fucked. I mean, Bran.
I'm not sure, to quote Muriel, I'm not sure I have the XP for this. Cannibalism is really where I know about.
If you're starving in the dead of winter.
And to go back to like Jojen paste, right? Why is Jojen missing? Like, what is the narrative purpose for Jojen to go missing if he isn't dead? 2, Jojen was like really depressed before this and was like clearly resigned to himself dying.
Yes.
I don't think it's any surprise that he's gonna die, but like, when is the question and how? And I think the idea that he's suddenly missing, like, unless he's off on a little quest, that we know nothing about, which I guess is a possibility, but I just think like it's dramatically horrifying and interesting to, feed him to Bran to essentially
Also,
boost Bran's power.
The three-eyed crow himself is kind of like encased in werewood, right? So there seems to be like this very organic magic that just incorporates bodies, plants, and stuff. So I feel like there must be also magical significance to like eating another person, and in this case, a person who already had a kind of a magical, mystical gift, or like the green sight. That I'm like, yeah, no, that makes sense. Trojan paste, yes.
Yeah, it unfortunately just makes too much sense.
It makes too much sense.
The tree feeds on a corpse, and then Bran feeds on the tree. It makes perfect sense.
Yeah, exactly.
Symbolically, it just works.
It's the circle of life, baby.
It's a cycle of life.
I mean, it wouldn't be the first time Bran has eaten a person. When he works into Summer, Summer eats people. Summer eats a lot of stuff. He dreams of eating people. So,
Yeah, that is the
those
point.
dogs.
Yeah. That's the point.
This is why
Oh,
I'm
I
not a
love
fan of
wargs.
wargs.
I love the warg stuff.
I'm not a fan of wargs,
I wish
and I'm not a fan
I'm
of
so mad.
targ.
I'm mad that they cut
I
all
bet you
the
like the targ stuff
a lot of the
too.
most interesting warg stuff from the show. They were cowards about direwolves. I get they had like budget issues, like enlarging wolves or some shit, but like that's weak. Weak.
Yes, agreed.
My best boy Ghost was like way underutilized after like season 3.
Yeah.
So I'm curious about y'all's in-game theories. I posted this one on. I don't think it's true for the record, but I really like it. It's kind of, I believe, colloquially known as Jon Snow White, which part of the theory is that he may come back with white hair. This is like a fantasy trope. It happens to Lady Stoneheart, right? But the theory is basically that Jon is the prince that was promised to the others. And we have this idea of the prince that was promised, and that is like, in this it's like a very literal idea of like that's part of the deals. They had a pact. Humans had a pact with the others where they were like, we give you a Night's King, and you don't murder us all. And
I like that.
peace. And so that Jon, for like rather than like having to kill all the others, in a very sort of generic fantasy ending. As we kind of got in the show in the worst way possible, I do imagine there would still be like battles, but like it kind of ends by them realizing, we need to create a pact, right? We have to have a balance. And so Jon heroically goes north and sacrifices himself to become their Night's King. We already know that humans are given to the others, right? With Crafter. So clearly there's some sort of dynamic going on there. The show
and
made
the Starks presumably did this at one point, right?
Exactly. And that's the whole like kind of the premise, right? And the Night's King legend is about a Stark becoming the Night's King, and on top of that, we know the others are looking for someone who seemingly looks like Jon Snow. I mean, that's kind of intuited. That's not like made explicit in the books, but the guy they kill in the beginning, who they kind of mess with, is described as looking a lot like Jon. Gray eyes, dark hair, pale skin, looking like a Stark, if you will. And there's just, I think, a lot of interesting stuff there. I think it would be, kind of subversive, but, poetic, tragic in a way. But I also don't feel like that's actually what George intended. I just think fans came up with a really cool idea. Just because I don't know. I suspect we are going to be in for something more about like eliminating the other, because like we have to get rid of this seasonal imbalance. That seems to be something that the show didn't really address. The books will. Like those seasons aren't normal. That isn't natural. George has been explicit about that. Like there's something magical going on there, and so I do think they're going to find a way to magically reset the world. To address an original sin of some sort. But we'll see.
Yeah. So I don't have any specific theory for like Endgame. I do have like a few bullet points, I guess, that I do very much believe that the tone will be bittersweet. So not complete despair or nihilism, definitely not that, but not, happy ending. Just bittersweet, or like that Tolkien-esque vibe at the end. I suspect a decent amount of the main big players, big characters will either die or go into exile or just not be part of ordinary society anymore. I love Daenerys as a character. She's one of my favorites, but I fully expected her to die at the end. Jon Snow, I'm not sure. I mean, I think he could die, but like if he were to become some kind of like no longer quite human and just by human society, it's a kind of death as well. There is this. I really do subscribe to this idea of balance as kind of this thematic through line for the series. because there's something out of whack with the seasons. And the others kind of represent this like winter and this preternatural winter. And there's the children of the forest who kind of represent this older natural order that the humans came and kind of fucked a bit. But you can't destroy nature. So you can't just have a very, basic standard good guys versus bad guys, and we just annihilate the bad guys, the natural forces. You can't annihilate the natural forces. They're there, but you can bring them back into balance. So I do believe that there's a push towards reestablishing balance and a state closer to harmony than not. And I know that I can't quote it exactly, but there's this very beautiful paragraph that Jojen says at one point. He mentions like the elements of nature, of like the earth, iron, and like winter, summer, and ice and fire. And that's the thing, the series called A Song of Ice and Fire, but it's not a song of ice against fire, it's ice and fire. And to me, that also points towards a state of balance and like balanced resolution. So there's nothing super specific about that, but like that to me would make sense towards an ending, like this balanced. And even the bittersweet is kind of also this, not fully one thing, not fully the other, but kind of this balance between the two. That's kind of, I feel like, and thematically, I feel that's what would make sense for the series. Also on that note, I'm sorry, but I do have to go. But it was it was a lot of fun. I'm sorry I was late, but it was a lot of fun to nerd out about Song of Ice and Fire. I've missed talking about this series so much. I should do it a lot more on the forum as well, and maybe another one of these in the future. But thanks so much for having me.
Yeah.
I hope everyone has a lovely rest of your evening, and I'll catch you all at a later point.
Mm-hmm.
So,
See you soon.
bye.
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 Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that idea. Mm-hmm.
Susanna, what do you think?
Yeah, I like the idea that Muriel was saying, and I liked the Jon Snow White as well. That would solve a few problems. Yeah, I would love to see him go and be king in the north, like properly, and then he can go back to Valyria, and because it has to be something to rebuild, it's such a. And then who's gonna stay on the throne? Because Westeros is gonna have to reset to what it was before Aegon came and conquered everything. That's the thing that Dany probably is not prepared to do, because she's used to saving cities, but then they have to accept a rule. If she goes and saves Westeros, it would be to Westeros go back to what it was before the dragons came, which means she would have to save them and either die or go back to Valyria and rebuild the empire there. Jon is fine in the north. Who's gonna rule? Tyrion. He's the more qualified, to be fair.
I don't have very strong thoughts, because fundamentally, I mean, this is the thing about, I guess, the way which Carl mentioned, George gardening. If you look at the original A Song of Ice and Fire outline from 1991, it's unbelievable that what we have now. Like he had this love triangle planned between Tyrion, Jon, and Arya at one point, which was something. And the characters as we know them now, I just don't know. I would like to see some kind of coming back to the light for Arya. I feel very bad. She has been very badly traumatized, and all the characters in book one, a lot of them are gone. But Arya, Sansa, they are both in very difficult places. I would like to see them gain some measure. What happened? Actually, I should ask this. I know Sansa becomes. She claims the north and she says the north is independent.
Yeah, she goes on a sea voyage because suddenly she's a sailor as well. came out of nowhere.
Yeah,
Just, "Oh, I'm going to find what's west of Westeros." Well, you just go around the world.
she's trying to find the Americas.
Oh, so
it was so stupid. And it just did
okay.
no point.
Okay, no, that doesn't help. I was trying to look for clues if something of what happened to the characters in the show could be clues for what happens to them
in
the
the
books.
show,
Yeah,
Arya, so she trains to be, the
how
ultimate
that
assassin.
One thing.
Avenges the family, kills the Night King. I'm sure she does smart. And then after everything, what she does, she just goes and explore the ocean. Yeah, makes perfect sense. Anyway, I was going with something. In the books, Sansa, one of the last bits from Brienne's point of view, Sansa is with the Hound at the end. So that's very important to me. I want to see them together. It's like the only couple I want to see together is like Sansa and the Hound.
Wait, I'm sorry. Romantically?
Yes.
The 14-year-old girl who was...
She's not 14 anymore. Get over it.
No,
she is. She's 14.
No,
she's 14 as of the end of the book. She's like 14 years old.
So was Dany when she married Drogo. So it's
and it was gross. It was gross then. It's gross now.
I know, but and I mean, I think this is worse than my theory, which I read. It's not my theory, but it's a theory that I read, which is that Jon
I could
married
be on board
Sansa.
with that.
No,
I can support that. It would be kind of gross,
but yeah, because it would unite two very, very strong claimants to this.
No.
I mean,
Sansa
I don't want to
lost
see
her direwolf.
No,
she lost Lady.
No,
she's gonna get a Hound. Okay, that's settled for me.
So I agree with every part of that except the romantic part of it. I think the Hound absolutely is going to come back into the fold and will defend Sansa in some measure. I think that just makes sense. Their characters are tied together. Although the Hound is as tied to Arya at this point as he is to Sansa. Maybe a little less. But I think he is tied to the Stark girls, and he is going to... I think he's going to come back. I mean, it's possible he won't, but I do think that the Grave Digger will make an appearance again before the end of the story.
Ooh, I'm gonna present two. This is tinfoil-less of all that I've read, and then we can maybe talk a little bit about the book actually and where they might go.
What?
So one is that Jon is his own father.
Oh no.
Yeah, this is like time traveling stuff, and the other one that I read of this is
that's a joke theory, though.
No,
to be fair,
there's no time travel.
So
no,
that's interestingly, there are people who passionately defend that A Song of Ice
Preston
and Fire
Jacobs is wrong about most things. I think he's really smart.
Yeah,
but he drank his own Kool-Aid.
Agree.
He's just got way too deep into it, and he can't see the forest for the trees anymore. I do think there is an element of time travel that will exist because we've already seen it. Bran. But Bran, there's going to be some sort of loop there, and Bran can
the Bran and
psychically go back in time. It's there. It happened in the show, and even not looking at the show, it's happened in the books. Like Bran spoke to his father, and Ned heard him. So clearly, I think it's going to be a loop thing where like anything that had happened, or anything that will happen, has already happened. Sort of like it's all going to be.
If it's going to be that, as much as I love that sort of thing, I'm going to be so upset because I don't think the story is built for properly. That.
Yeah, same. I agree, and I was just going to ask Carl because I'll ask Susanna, Carl, and Steve, all of you. Name one story which has pulled off time travel properly forget one with this many
I
characters and this many timelines and this many
Timelessness, if I may,
interconnected consequences.
and dark.
and I think Dark is
Dark
in
is
the range of
yeah
complexity.
the ultimate time travel
Fair
story.
enough.
Just don't bother. I thought I did a pretty solid one, with minimal paradoxes, and then Dark comes out and it's like, yeah, you're so far. You're not even in the same, in the same.
I don't know how they plotted that show. It's insane.
It's
It is
perfection.
any listener who hasn't seen it, give it a shot. It is really dark. It is bleak, but it is just phenomenal. So good.
I was
It's on
laughing
Netflix.
when I think Paramita, when we recommended Dark and we start watching, and then you said something in the forum saying, "Oh, I think I noticed this trope that I don't
Yeah.
like the time travel," and I just face palm. Paramita, that's the time travel story. It's not an element. It's it. Oh, dear.
I DNF'd it after one episode because it has time travel. This I watched one episode. I liked the episode a lot. I loved the score. I liked the performances. I liked everything.
Don't.
And then I was like, is this going to have
Think of
time
it
travel?
not as
Yes,
having
DNF.
time travel, but as being time travel. Just give it another shot.
That is so arbitrary. You got
Listeners,
you got to
Steve
give
and
it more than
Susanna
one
are
episode. Like, just
vehemently
give it a shot.
nodding
Give it the first
at
season
my
and see.
DNF.
Okay. Anyway, I'm in general also I hate time travel. I think it can be done well. I mean, Back to the Future I think is fun. Like, it doesn't make sense, but it's fun. I think
Yeah.
there are stories where it can be okay. I think in general it makes the story worse. I think A Song of Ice and Fire probably isn't the right story for it, but it's just going to be a part of it. What
Keep it with Bran. Like that wonky POV, because Bran is anyway, his stuff is weird. I can buy it in that. But if it permeates
that's not gonna,
everywhere, like this Tyrion thing,
no,
and
that's not going to happen.
then
No.
the
It's going to
Jon
be
to
Bran
Jon's father
alone,
thing, I'm like,
and I don't think it'll be
what the
like
hell
the
is that?
solution to everything. I just think it will impact things in some way. I wouldn't be surprised if Bran sets the seeds for his own like crippling in some way or something, to kind of like close the loop.
Yeah.
But other than that, like I don't think he's gonna like go back in time and like destroy the others before they ever happen or something stupid like that. Like we'll get Hodor and we'll get Bran doing something to impact his own journey, just because that's how time travel stories always work, and I think that'll be it.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm. The one other thing, it's not a theory, but this is more about the actual structure of the books as they are looking now. And I wanted to ask everyone about it. So the way I'm reading it now is a Game of Thrones is prologue. And then you have Clash is Act 1, Part 1. Because a large part of Clash is moving pieces, expanding the world, introducing us to loads of players. Because game is like, is it Starks versus Lannisters? And there's a bit of Targaryen. And then Clash tells you that, oh, you've seen nothing. This is the world. There's Baratheons, there's Greyjoys, loads of stuff. And also getting into all these nitty-gritties. But then you also get a bit of payoff at the end of Clash. And then I see Storm as Act 1, Part 2. It's essentially payoff of all those chess pieces while opening new questions. And then Feast and Dance, I'm viewing it as one book because it is what was initially conceptualized. And there is a combined reading order. So I'm viewing this as Act 2, Part 1. And so again, this is mainly moving chess pieces, setting up for something. And I'm assuming Winds is Act 2, Part 2. So we'll get payoff, ideally. And then Dream is epilogue. So nice symmetry. So prologue, epilogue, and then Act 1, Part 1, Act 1, Part 2. I mean, this is just how I'm thinking about it. But my question is that purely from a structural point of view and also having to bind a book, not about whether it's published in 1 volume or 2 volumes. From what I know, George R.R. Martin actually cut significant sections of dance, which have to now go into wind. So just from a writing point of view and from binding the book point of view, is Winds going to be 2 volumes? And B, is it possible to do the kind of payoff on the scale that George, because from Clash and Storm to Feast Dance, I think he's roughly double the POV chapters, roughly. So is it possible to do the kind of payoff he does in Storm
yes.
with Winds?
Yeah.
But he has to be really judicious with page count and start cutting heads left and right.
Yeah.
Like Barristan Selmy needs to die, Victorian Greyjoy needs to die, maybe Arianne, but she probably has to be her POV into like Aegon. That seems to be where her chapters and wins are going. John Connington probably needs to die.
Yeah.
There's a lot of characters that need to die for it to work. That probably have to deal with Lady Stoneheart. I just don't think she's going to be endgame. I think it's possible. I think that's probably one of the things he's struggling with, is like how to get it all in one book, even a really big book. I think you're right that like he cut like 200 pages from Dance.
I'm going to ask, just pause a minute to ask all of you this, that given that he cut 200 pages of Dance, which is now going into what is presumably an already bulky book, what are your thoughts on the entire arc of Quentin Martyr, which begins and ends in Dance? Could it have been a side novella?
Did you say Quentin? Oh, I think it's the biggest waste of pages in the whole series. That and Eris Oakhart.
Yeah,
I think Quentin shouldn't. Or go ahead, Susanna. Sorry.
I was thinking out loud mostly. So two things. I'm gonna say the previous one. Yes, I think it's possible, and it's possible by killing a lot of people. I watched an interview with him a while back that he loved. He's saying something that he loved when 2 points of view characters meet, because it meant he could kill one of them because he didn't need to have two points of view for the same thing. So I have the impression that a lot of people are going to die in Winds of Winter, so to get the points of view under control. As to the pages, okay, this is a horrible thing to look at it. So it said that he cuts 200 pages, and we are here saying, oh, this part was boring, it could have been cut, that part was boring. And it's true, I agree, it was the weakest parts in the books. I don't think they added that much. It might be just, preparing something for whatever comes next. Every scene always has a point, at least in the author's mind. And could have been a novella, could have been put in yeah, but it's not a big deal. It's such a long book. What is 200 pages of, fluff? It just adds to the world building. I think you're doing I always feel bad when I have to cut stuff because I can't afford the editing of, and I sometimes think that my stories would be better if I had left a few more darlings in, but it really, and when I see authors that can indulge in that, some do it pretty well. Like, for example, in Sun Eater, I love that, there's stuff that is completely unnecessary for the plot, but it's still a joy to read. And then there are others, I'm not going to mention, that is just overindulgence and, just because you can in this, I've wrote 20,000 words today and my books are 40,000 long and aren't I amazing? And it's just the same page after page. So it depends. It's not for us to go to the point. I mean, if it enriches the story, even if it's just a little bit, and if it's well written, so it's not, you're not literally just burning your eyes to the pages.
Yeah,
fine, let it be. It doesn't do novellas. It's just going to be one big tome after big tome. They're all going to be like this.
Yeah,
it's just stupid. If it was up to me, I would love to
my
have
argument-
like a 10
Yep.
of them. I don't care how they would be
Good,
divided, but it
good
would
arm
be a lot
workout.
more practical to read.
I on some level I agree with that, but I think my argument against that would be one, Quentin could very well still appear in the story and just be in Dany's chapters.
Yeah.
He could just appear. He could just appear in Marine, and Daenerys rejects him, and then he frees the dragons, and the dragon, he gets killed. Because that's his entire purpose in the story. And, there are people who think he's alive. I think they're wrong, but, whatever. Right.
Yeah. That's a very popular
what I will
theory.
say is I think that
At
would
least I've
make
seen it
his chapters
higher up
more
the
interesting
iceberg.
if he is still alive. I think a lot of fans just can't accept the fact that George wrote something that is ultimately fluff. And it's not the first time he's done it. Again, I think Dorne is filled with it. I think even the Iron Islands chapters, arguably, that could have been told from POV. But the crux of my argument is that Dance doesn't even have a climax. Jon's story is the only story that has a climax. Everything else will end right before the climax of the story. So that's what, in many ways, narratively holds back those books to some degree, right? Like, we're missing the Battle of Ice in the north between Stannis and Ramsay, right? We're missing the Battle of Fire and Marine between Daenerys' forces and all the slave shitheads. We're missing the Euron's big battle in the Reach. We're missing there's a fourth battle somewhere. It's probably something with Aegon. I'm blanking, but the point, the big ones being the Battle of Ice and Battle of Fire. Stannis' battle and Daenerys' battle, right? And it's probably not going to be Daenerys mostly. It's probably going to be
Fire.
Barristan leading it largely, because Daenerys is off dealing with the Dothraki in the Dothraki Sea. So we're missing the climax that should have happened that we're now going to get at the start of Winds, and it's going to make the start of Winds really exciting. But I think, instead we spent. I mean, it's not even 200 pages. It's like, the chapters it's probably 100 pages, maybe less. But I do think that's page count we could have used elsewhere. Like, I don't think we needed to care about Quentin as a character for his death to be meaningful. I don't think thematically it adds much. It's sort of like, it's all, those chapters are obsessed with like subverting the hero's journey, being like, oh, Quentin views himself as this romantic hero who's going to go and woo the princess, and every step of the journey sucks. I think that's literally how his like first chapter opens, is like, journeys aren't, what they're like in, the stories. We've already gotten that from Sansa. That's Sansa's entire character arc. Like, the whole story, the whole like series is about deconstructing in many ways. And I think ultimately reconstructing, but like subverting sort of these traditional heroic medieval narratives. And I just think it's a waste of pages. Like, we just don't need these characters in that much detail, at least. Like, Quentin, we don't need. It's crazy when you look at like a Game of Thrones and how quickly paced it is compared to Feast and Dance. Like, Catelyn leaves Winterfell and just appears in King's Landing in her next chapter, which is like 100 pages later. She rides a boat and she appears, as opposed to getting like every step of the journey. I even think in Clash, you start to see the bloat. I think Arya's chapters are overwritten in Clash. We spend too much time of like just seeing how fucked up the Riverlands are, and her walking around characters that don't matter that much. And I think
Fair
George...
Yep.
It just got worse as the series went on. And I love these books. I mean, it's like one of, if not my favorite fantasy series of all time. But
yeah, I was going to say that all of us, irrespective of how we are saying or what we are saying, it's primarily from a place of wistfulness and sadness, and actually from a place of love, and not, we are not out to critique this book. It's more from what could have happened, and maybe if X had happened, then maybe it's coming from that. I very much relate to both your
No.
points.
I mean, I've been talking a lot. I would say that I would be much more forgiving and less judgmental, or less critical of like Quentin's chapters or Aryo Hota or Eris Oakheart or whoever if we were getting the books, but we're not. And the fact that he seems unable to finish this story, it just leaves it open to be like, well, George, like, this is clearly one of the places you're going wrong. Like, I can tell you from like an editorial mindset, like why, I mean, I'm not a professional editor, but I have had to edit things, and I don't think it takes a lot of like even particularly deep analysis to like see where this is why it's getting harder for you. You're creating bloat, you're creating additional subplots you don't need, and it's pulling you away from the story that you started and have been telling. I mean, again, like all Feast for Crows, like half of the book started out as like a mega prologue. It was just going to cover Dorne and the Iron Islands, and it was going to be from like I think like two POVs, one in each place, and then it suddenly became like three Iron Islands POVs, three Dornish POVs.
Three each, yeah.
It's at
Three
least
in
three, right?
Iron
It's
Islands, and Dorne
Arya,
is more, I
Hota,
think,
Eris
or at least
Oakheart, and
same.
Arianne, and
It's a
is
lot.
there one more? Is that it?
Yeah.
But like in that case, Eris again only has one POV. Why was that chapter even written from his perspective? Why wasn't it written from Arianne's?
I understand when. I mean, this is one thing where I guess I'm very sorry for Martin, and it's probably because I've come so late to the game. I've come to these books in 2023 when all of you have been reading, watching for so long. But I mean, what happened ultimately at the end is in 2011 we got the fifth book, and we have five books. And I sometimes wonder what would have happened if he hadn't published Feast in 2005. No, if he just sort of held on, and that time he wasn't George R.R. Martin of world famous Game of Thrones show, whose name will sell any book, whose blurb will sell books. So I guess he had to put something out. He was not on that level where he could just say, no, I'm going to take my time the way he's doing now, which is fair enough. But I wonder whether that aspect of Feast being published in 2005 and becoming canon led to, it must have led to problems, because in the afterword to Feast we see that he says that expect this next year, and actually it took a lot of time. And we know that that is not the time when he was busy traveling to cons or working on the show, because the show, yes, it was in development towards the end, but not from he was not required to be involved at that level. And so in a way I'm just sad for him, because I don't know how much of this happened because of this split between feast and dance and this doubling of POVs. If he had it all together, if up till Storm was canon, and then he has the feast plus dance manuscript, he could do anything. And maybe that's why he's hesitant to publish. A lot of people say that just publish however much volume one of Winds. Maybe he doesn't want to repeat that, because if volume one of Winds becomes canon, then he can't change volume two. Or, well, he has to change volume two, and then again, exactly same thing happens. And after that, he has one more book. And I'm sure he also feels, with the constraints on his time, his mood has also been very naturally much more pensive. His friends, a lot of them are passing away and things like that. So definitely the way he, yes, I can write 3 more books. I would read as many books as he read. We would all read, I'm sure. But I'm sure he realizes that, time is finite and things like that. So maybe he doesn't want to. That's the part of me that keeps hoping. I absolutely, everyone feel free to tell that part of it that you're propped up on opium. Stop it. But that's the part of me that believes that he wants to get it right before he publishes. And I do think Winds will be in 2 volumes. The kind of writer he is, very expansive style.
Yeah.
No, not chug 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 chug. That's never been. Even Game, which is very fast paced, and Storm, he does take his time throwing in those little nuggets. And as you said, all of you said that, so that's what makes the world rich. And I mean, that's part of why we want the book so desperately, because there's just so much to talk about, and we want to see, whether, not just whether we are right, but what happens, not just in the sense of what happens at the end, because then the show would be fine, but how it happens and how he uses all this lore and all these little nuggets everywhere to, go towards the ending. But yeah, I don't know. I know that
I don't care how many books. I don't care. It can they can come in like novellas, just shorter books, just 100,000 words each, every 6 months. I don't care. Just tell the whole story, please. We need to know the whole story.
I agree.
Carl, how about you?
Very too much. It's
How
bad.
keenly do you wait for them
Anytime I'm
even
still
today?
someone who anytime he has not a blog post that mentions wins or something, I get excited. And there was even something recently that he posted, and I was like, oh my god, is this it? Like I couldn't believe it. And I'm relatively, I didn't read Dance when it came out. Like I mentioned, I came to the series, how long ago? 8 years ago now, 9 years ago. But I wish. I think honestly, the fact that he's continues to say it's going to be 7 books is part of what's messing him up too. Because if he is just going to write it so expansively, he needs to just accept that it's going to be however long it is, which is what Robert Jordan did. Robert Jordan just like continued to just be like, I don't know, it just keeps getting longer. And and Robert Jordan came up with this sort of pseudo outline for what he viewed as the 12th and final book, and Brandon Sanderson ended up being like, no, there's actually 3 books, and they're all huge. So so I think that George, I think he is handicapping himself by being like, wind's of winter, dream of spring, that's it, because there is a lot of story to be told, and he has to pull things together. And I think he almost should just expand it more and be like, yeah, it's actually 10 books now, or it's 8 books even, and that by trying to condense everything when that is just naturally not how he writes, it's hurting him. On the other hand, he could continue to expand it endlessly, and the series could never end too. But I would rather, the story progress even at a snail's pace. I'd rather get another Feast and Dance, right? Like I would take that because it would be more time spent in that world. And as much as I may feel Quentin's chapters are frustrating, or Aerosol Carts or whoever, I'm still glad to have something. And there are a lot of chapters outside of that I love. I love Jon's arc in Dance. It's some of my favorite stuff. I love Tyrion's stuff. Daenerys is hit or miss for me, but there's some really amazing chapters in there. And any Arya chapter, any Sansa chapter, I'm there for it. Jaime and Brienne. I want to know. It kills me that the cliffhanger that's the cliffhanger more than anything, because it's so unlike anything we got in the show. And I'm like, I need to know what happens with Lady Stoneheart and Jaime and Brienne. Like, how does that play out? And surely he's written that by this point. Like, I would be shocked if he hasn't written it's even just one chapter, but at least a couple that deals with that and resolves that cliffhanger. And I want to know what happens. I want these characters I love to see whatever the next, it doesn't even have to be very far, but just whatever the next step is for them. And it's fresh. I would love to just get the Battle of Fire and Battle of Ice, like see how those play out. I would love to see how Daenerys, gets the Dothraki, even if we don't get to see her come to Westeros. I would love to just see her kind of finish that loop. Just getting whatever would be nice. And we still don't even have that. But I do believe that should, tragedy strike, as it inevitably does, I think we will get some form of a book that George has written. It may feel incomplete, but I think it will advance the story. And what comes after that, I don't know. But I think we will get, at least 300,000 words of something at some point. Because he's seemingly written. He says he was like 3/4 done. He said that like a couple years ago. So, Yeah.
I'm sure he's written more than double that or something, and he probably, because I've heard this thing that George R.R. Martin, he actually writes the same POV or the same chapter from different POVs to see which one will work better, and that's the kind of thing.
That is the kind of thing you have to do
that
sometimes.
Is commitment.
That's why my latest book has an omniscient POV, because I couldn't go through that again. But that's, I used to do that a lot. Yeah, just get a sense which one. When you have an ensemble, it's
I think
work.
And to the benefit of pacing, I think that the characters are starting to converge will help the pacing somewhat, because they will be dealing with the same plot, right? And so, doesn't matter who the POV is, it's going to be advancing that story, right? So like if for Meereen, for example, Tyrion is in Meereen now. We have his like first or actually maybe the first 2 of his Winds chapters. And so we're seeing, and Barristan's there too, dealing with the battle. And so like we're seeing that play out in parallel, really, and they're going to meet, or something's going to happen. I mean, Tyrion is certainly going to end up in Daenerys' court, and similarly, characters are going to move north, where a lot of the action is. And so you're going to see
Yeah, I was
this
just about to say
confluence of
that's the
events,
other one.
right? Like Cersei's going to have to deal with Aegon or Fagon, as I think we all agree, right? And that's going to be interesting, right? To see John Connington and Cersei collide. And stuff's going to happen. And Arianne, right? Arianne's going to see Aegon as of her Winds chapters. So, yeah, I think there's a lot of
So
interesting
much
stuff, and I think the
potential,
pace will
so
pick up to
much.
some degree. I mean, because you just think like Feast and Dance were really about the characters separating and going on their own individual journeys, and Winds is going to start to really bring them back together, and so that should
Yeah.
naturally kind of increase the drama and increase the pacing.
Mm-hmm. We can hope.
Any thoughts from you, Steve? Any final thoughts?
I've lost hope that this series will be finished by Martin. I don't think it will be. I think it'll be a William Jordan, Brandon Sanderson type of situation where someone gets his outline and finishes it. But I don't think he'll ever finish it.
I feel the same way. Yeah.
Yeah, and what's sad is that
It's okay. I'm crying in the
the
corner.
definitive
I'm
version
fine.
for most people, because of that, will be the TV show, and that's sad.
No, Parameter, no, it can't be. No.
No.
Well,
Yeah.
for me, it's
I
not.
hate to say it.
The show, from like the third season, pretty much. It's funny. For example, with The Expanse, I have, and even with the Witcher, I have the stories from the TV show and from the books and from the games, and everything is it's separate. It's compartmentalized, and they work very well. I love them all. With a Game of Thrones, the moment it started diverging, for me it was always the books. I've always been the real story for me is in the books, not the show. So that's why I guess I'm so invested in the books. And I wasn't so upset with the ending. I mean, I was annoyed after a certain point. Where the levels of annoyance they were increasing. I was like, how bad can this get? But yeah, I still have hopes for the books.
Steve is giving this very, sedate nod.
Yeah. I don't know.
Like, oh, you sweet summer children. 2025, Steve,
I'm with
for
you,
wins.
Steve.
I can feel it.
I think
can
what
just
you
feel
said
it.
is what's going to happen. I think there's a chance we get wins from Martin, but no chance he finishes the series, which is really sad to say. There's no way. That's just not how he writes.
Unless he's
Like,
writing both together.
They
That
are
would be
already
insane.
written.
I think that
It
is.
just cannot be bothered with dealing with the mess of, because obviously he's not going to please everyone, and he just can't be bothered. He's at the stage of his life where he doesn't have to deal with this shit. So they are written and they're going to be published when doesn't have to deal with.
100%.
If
He's waiting until he's dead, and he's just going to release it all. And we're going to find out it's actually 4 more books, and they're all written, and they're edited, and they're ready to go. And
Yeah. And that's how he gained his immortality, because now his life work is done.
If not for the show, the series would be done.
I
think the TV show ruined. I think it ruined him. I don't really blame him. I mean, I think the whole experience, I think, soured him on the whole series.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I've been. Yeah. Okay. I'm sad, but again, as a bit of a. Another thing I wanted to say, which I think maybe we should have discussed a bit earlier, but this is another reason why I really like The Song of Ice and Fire, is that the world never feels overpowered by magic, at least up to book 5. There are hints of fantastical elements everywhere, and they are very strong, but you never get the sense that anything goes. in the way that you do in some other series. And that's actually something that I quite appreciate. Like he's put a lot of thought into the way it's the fantastical elements. Because you can almost say that a lot of it is historical fiction with fantastical initial books at least. But then, of course, it intensifies and then the implications start to come in. But I think he's done it very slowly and very carefully so that it doesn't feel like, oh, this person can just, do click one finger and something can happen at you. I mean, this was one of the objections that at least we as readers had in the final Harry Potter book that, a lot of things that were not supposed to be allowed to happen
Shadow Baby
started happening
that
in
Shadow
the final
Baby
book.
opened a whole can of worms that Martin simply cannot close. At any point, Melisandre could have a Shadow Baby that can assassinate whoever they want.
Yeah, why hasn't she done it again? Yeah, good question.
True.
He comes up with excuses like, "Oh, Stannis is too tired" or whatever.
That's actually a really good point.
Shadow Baby, he opened that can of worms, and I don't think you can close it. That's the time turner of this series. Is it just doesn't it doesn't make sense. But that said, it's a small thing in the grand scheme of things, and I can just deal with it.
Well, yeah. Well, playing devil's advocate because it was pretty cool. The Shadow Baby and Melisandre, she's awesome. I mean, I want to know more about the character. The little bit that the show revealed was good, but I think there's a lot more there to explore. But the thing is, the magic elements are there, but it's mainly character driven. So, and even though they are huge, they seem to be discreet, but they are not. We have dragons, for crying out loud. We have zombies. We have faceless assassins. The magic elements, they are there, but because we are so focused on the characters, and they are so used to that sort of thing, either by because it's part of the lore or because it's just part of their daily lives. You just open the window, there goes the dragon. It makes them less magical. And if you think about all the stuff that even in our lives that could be considered magical and we don't pay attention to them, from phones to planes to radiation, you don't even know it. You wouldn't know it was there until it hit you. And it's because it's focused on the characters and their perspective on the magic of the magic, that it becomes less important, or kind of distracts us from it. But it's there and it is important, and it's what makes the world special, in my opinion, and that's genius.
I agree, and I think that's where, when in the book, and I am going to say in the book, it is when, not if, in Winds, when we, and probably when we actually start to see that escalation, it will hit. Because if it was commonplace, or if it's just something that we've been used to it so far in the book, it wouldn't have that impact that I anticipate it might have in Winds. So that's just something that I thought from a reading point of view, and also I'm sure for the writers on our panel, they appreciate as writers that something Martin has very carefully fine-tuned. Probably why it's
the
a
magic
favorite
feels,
series for many of us.
Truly magical, mystical. It is wondrous, and I agree that I think that's something I really like. Something I don't like as much with a lot of the hard magic stuff we see these days is it kind of takes away the wonder, which is what I like about fantasy and magic.
Yeah.
And I do think that, George is very good at that. And, that's why I actually don't really mind the Shadow Baby that much. I'm not someone who feels the need to pick at every logical issue in a story. Even Harry Potter, it didn't, admittedly I grew up with that stuff. So I was much less critical of when it was all coming out. I read the final book when I was I don't know, I was 10 or something. And so, but in general, I'm less, it doesn't bother me as much if it is sufficiently interesting. And I do think how George handles magic is interesting. And yeah, it's going to be a shock to the characters and it's going to be awesome to see. I mean, they're all going to shit their pants when they deal with the others for the first time, or dragons for that matter. Westeros is going to lose its collective shit. It's easy to forget, but most of Westeros doesn't believe that the dragons are real or even know about them as of the end of A Dance with Dragons, ironically.
And yet it's only been like, what, 150 years since the last dragon? Short memory.
Yeah. Short memories is right, yeah.
Well, the time flew by.
I hope we'll get together,
Yes.
soon in the next few years to discuss Winds of Winter. That would be great.
I would love that. Yeah.
We need to do like a chapter by chapter discussion just to make
Definitely.
up for
Yes.
all the
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, we'd have to do that. That would be fun.
Yes.
I hope it does.
It would
I
be
just don't
fun.
think it will.
And I really hope it's going to happen.
But until next time we talk, which will be before any books are released, Susanna, where can people find you?
You can find me on my channel, Den of the Weird, or on X as Chronodendron, or on the page during forums. I'm still around.
And Carl.
You can find me at Carl D. Albert on a lot of social media or on page chewing, and you can find my book, Truth of Crowns. You look it up, you'll find it.
I'll leave all the links below for Susanna and Carl's books and Paramita.
Best place to find me is the page chewing forum. And I want to reiterate, I'm not a Song of Ice and Fire.
I'm a fanboy. I've been deep in it for so long. It's maybe my number one fandom, and it is a problem. I spend too much time reading theories and responding to theories on the internet. It's bad.
I had no idea that. I mean, I knew there were theories, but I didn't know that they had like nicknames and things like that. It was an education. I was just focused on my theories, and then suddenly I start seeing all these, R versus LJ, what? They catalog them. It's the whole world. Yeah, amazing. They have names.
Yeah, some crazy ones. A lot of them I didn't hear of.
So I learn a lot. Thank you, and I have more to think about. I'm gonna investigate that Thor and the lemon tree now. Yeah, I know. No helping that. Yeah.
So that's a pretty good one.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well,
That's
until
a
next
good
time,
one.
we will talk to everyone soon. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Just trying to stop. The internet's acting weird. Maybe it's the solar flares that are.
It looks like it's still happening. Mine.
Yeah. Looks like it's still rolling.
Yeah.
That's creepy.
Yeah, it's still fully recording, at least as of my POV.
That's weird.
It's just not responding.
Let me try to refresh. Hold on.
Well, this was fun. I always enjoy talking this clearly. As I said, I have a problem. I really do need an intervention. I need to just give up hope is what I need to do, but it's unfortunately a part of me.
It's coming. I'm pretty sure. All the predictions are aligned in the right direction. And I'm also hopeful
I hope
for
you're right,
Paramita.
in
I really do.
2025.
I don't understand. I don't.
Susanna
Rothfuss
is
is the
being
one I
so
really can't wrap
kind.
my head around because like I just feel like, I mean, there's a lot of stories still to be told there, but it is seemingly like, I feel like that's one you could definitely do in one more book. And I don't know, I don't know what went wrong there.
Mm.
Once you become a King Killer reader, then any other series, whether it's finished, unfinished, you can just start anything. Doesn't matter. Like when people tell me, my series something is unfinished, I'm like, who cares? I started reading Sword of Shadows by J.V. Jones because it comes up on Reddit with like if you like the Beyond the Wall stuff, this is the series
Oh,
for you,
wow.
and it's
Okay.
unfinished, and the last book came out in
Yeah, there you go.
2007.
That's how
I
I
was like,
feel.
who cares?
I don't honestly overall
I'm
mind if
game
it's
for it.
unfinished or not. So like just books in general. I mean, I would like them to be finished, but I know a lot of people don't feel the same. A lot of people I know
Yeah.
have been like traumatized. But yeah,
No, I understand. I respect that, but I mean, the thing is, it would be a hypocrite for me to do hypocritical for me to do that because King Killer is well, Lord of the Rings, Gorman Cast, Harry Potter. After that will be King Killer. Yeah, so it's in my top four, and then after Ostenard, A Song of Ice and Fire is the next one. So two top series are like that. So
we should talk about Austin Art at
what
some
we have
point
is
and
so good.
maybe even
I'm
an
fine.
influence on a Song of Ice and Fire because it is quite
Yeah.
prevalent when you really like sit down and think about. It's like, oh, George just like straight up was like, I'm going to do that.
Yeah.
The entire premise of Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn is just the same premise basically as
I mean,
the initial start of A Song of Ice and Fire.
True. Then this one, I think the prologue of Clash is very similar to the
Is it really?
prologue of
That's one I hadn't noticed. Interesting.
Stone of Farewell.
Is it all from? What is the prologue of Stone of Farewell? What happens in it?
But I mean, it's the, what do I say? The city stuff, and then the no, it's not the city stuff. Sorry, it's the Norn stuff, and then
Is there a
there's
is there a
creepy stuff
poisoning that
happening
goes wrong
in
or
the
something? Because the
background. And oh no, okay, so I'm wrong. The
okay
prologue of Stone of Farewell is
Clash
similar
is
to the prologue of Game of
Clash
Thrones.
yeah
Yeah,
yes
that's yeah. Clash is Melisandre and Master Pycelle. So yeah, not that. Not that is actually a really good one of the. I mean, all the prologues are very good, but that one I really like because you can really see Melisandre as a character, and she's terrifying, yes, but I'm very fond of that
I enjoy
character
her too.
for some creepy reason.
What is going on?
Don't know. Unrelated to A Song of Ice and Fire, Paramita, have you ever read Lady Chatterley's Lover?
I have read it, but when I was very, very young, like maybe when I was 15 years old.
I started it
back.
today, and I'm like,
I don't remember
wow,
much of
where
it.
was this book all my life? Kind of feeling, yeah.
Ah, you know, I wanted to reread it because there's this project, and it's not a project, but it's this connection in my mind. So Anna Karenina, Madame Bovary, and Lady Chatterley's Lover.
It's not similar at all. That's what I thought. It has nothing to do with Madame Bovary or Anna Karenina.
And all by me.
This is so far, and I'm shocked.
Oh wow!
It's one of the most feminist books ever written, and I can't believe it's written by a man. But it's
that's where I was gonna go. I was like, these are three books written by three male authors from three different cultures, because French, Russian, and British, and I wanted to read and compare them. And I've read Madame Bovary and Anna Karenina relatively recently, but Lady Chatterley's Lover, I read long back. So I actually had planned to do this last year, and then as usual, I was like, well, and I didn't do it. But maybe I should reread it. That's really good feedback.
Yeah.
I'll add it. I'm sure we have the book. Yeah, my mom has the book. So that's really cool. Okay. So, well, this was loads of fun.
Sorry, the mic was off. Yeah. Sorry, I was quiet a lot because every time I talk, I just get a coughing fit on top of everything. So it's been fun. Mm-hmm.
I hope you didn't strain
Oh,
your
thank
voice
you.
too much.
Me too.
But
It's been
take
over a
rest,
week. I'm tired of
and I
being
hope you
sick.
get well soon.
So yeah. Have a great weekend, and I love the whole.
Oh, fair enough. Bye bye.